Today we are going to talk about something called the Rhetorical Triangle, which is going to help you make more convincing arguments. It's something that we will, in this video, briefly go over, and then we'll talk about it more in depth as the year goes on. When we get to Kill a Mockingbird, we'll look at how one of the characters uses this rhetorical triangle to try and convince people to agree with him. You can take notes today if you would like. Or if you can just remember what ethos, pathos, and logos are, then you don't need to take notes. But it's up to you. So here is this little presentation I created. If it's going to go, there we go. So the rhetorical triangle is basically this thing that Aristotle came up with back in the day, where he and his buddies would stand around and try and figure out, okay, what is the way that we can be the most convincing? Are there positions we can take that are going to make us more convincing than others? Like, what ways do people persuade each other? And so the three things that they came up with, kind of three angles you can approach persuasion from, are what are called ethos, logos, and I guess pathos. I've always called it pathos, but pathos, tomato, tomato, okay? But these three things help you to achieve your purpose, whatever that purpose is, whether it's to persuade a crowd of people that they should vote for you, whether it's to to persuade your mom that she should buy you a new cell phone, whatever it is, you can use these to help you. So the first of these different positions you can take is called pathos. And what this is arguments based on emotion. So you're using things with an emotional component to it to try and convince people to agree with you. So for instance, we have this ad here for Doctors Without Borders. Take a minute and look at this and try to see if you can figure out what in here would be trying to appeal to your emotions and then what their purpose is. Okay. Not a lot of think time, but some. So the purpose of Doctors Without Borders, right, is this organization goes out and helps, especially third world countries, but places that need medical attention. And what they're saying with Doctors Without Borders is, it doesn't matter where you're from, we're doctors, we're going to help you. Not just because you're from our country, but because you're humans, right? And so the purpose of this ad would be to get you to either donate money or to be aware of the program, to look at how you can help. And so some of the things that they're doing from a pathos standpoint to emotionally convince you to agree with them is they've got this cute little child here, right? And this doctor is helping this child. And we're assuming maybe this child is sick. Tiny humans are always an emotional appeal. You're like, I want to protect the tiny human, right? And so by having a child on here instead of like a really old person, I mean, I guess old people can be emotional too, but instead of having an adult, they have a child, because then you'll be like, I want to help children. That really tugs at my emotions, seeing sick kids, right? So that is something that has an emotional appeal. Even the name Doctors Without Borders is kind of a pathos-centered argument, because what it does is it's saying, like, we're good people. We're not worried about where these people come from. We just want to help people. And so that emotionally makes you think, these are good people. I want to help them. In writing, or I guess here's another picture. Sorry, we thought we were at the writing one. This is another kind of pathos-centered argument. It says, dead man talking, hang up and drive, end of conversation. And we have our skeleton friend here holding a cell phone that looks oddly like a calculator, but is in fact probably a cell phone. Okay, so look at this and decide, okay, how is this trying to manipulate your emotions so that you will do what it says? Okay, well, looking at him, it looks like the purpose of this ad is to save a life. So it wants to prevent people from dying while talking on their cell phones. How does it manipulate your emotions? Well, death is very scary. It's an emotional thing, right? We often have like a reaction to that. And so by having a skeleton on a phone, you think, oh man, if I do this, I'm going to die. So don't do that, right? So that's an emotional appeal. Okay? In one of the worst commercials of all time, they use pathos to manipulate you, right? I mean, look at that sad dog. Oh, they're suffering. I just feel so sad inside, right? All of these things. Oh, okay, that's all I can take, right? But they want you to donate money to their organization, and so they show these sad pictures of little animals and this sad song to make you feel like, I've got to help, I've got to send you money, right? And so they're persuading you using pathos or emotion. In writing, President Obama talked about when they captured Osama bin Laden, and during his speech, he said this: the images of 9/11 are seared into our national memory, and yet we know that the worst images are those that were unseen to the world. The empty seat at the dinner table, children who were forced to grow up with their mother or their father, parents who would never know the feeling of their child's embrace, nearly 3,000 citizens taken from us, leaving a gaping hole in our hearts. Now, President Obama could have just said, 9/11 was rough, a lot of people died, right? He could have given us numbers and facts, but instead what he does is he emphasizes that the worst images are things we don't even, most of us see. There's no longer someone sitting at dinner with you because they died or they went to war, children who lost parents, parents who lost children because there were children who died in this. And he really appeals to that emotional part of you that, loves people. And now we can imagine these people who don't have their loved ones with them. And so he talks about the capture in this way, hoping to appeal to your emotions. Okay, so that is pathos. The next one is called ethos. And a lot of people think, ethos, emotion, but don't get confused with that. Ethos actually is talking about the credibility of the speaker. So you're going to win the audience's trust. That's how you're going to try to convince them, because of who you are. So I have for you two very different celebrities. We have Oprah on this side, and then, of course, Miley Cyrus on this side. Now, if I want, let's say I have a product, and I'm trying to sell it to you. That is my purpose. And I want to use ethos in order to help me sell this product. If, let's say, this product is a brand of business clothing for a chic businesswoman, I would probably try to get Oprah to help me sell that because she seems sophisticated and very professional, right? Whereas Miley Cyrus, I might contact her if I was trying to sell athletic clothes or something because she's a little bit more sporty to me than Oprah would be. And so depending on your message, you could have someone else with a reputation try and sell that product versus a different person who had a different reputation, right? If I want people to help with like a human rights project, probably I'm going to go with Oprah because, again, that's like her whole deal. And then if I was, trying to have a music concert, I would probably go and have Miley be my spokesperson because she's more credible in that field. So you can use things about your own personality or the personality of experts and their knowledge to help you convince someone through ethos. Businesses have an ethos, right? So we've got Google. What is the reputation of Google? Well, it's that you can find anything on Google, right? We now say Google it. Back in my day, we would be like, I need to find a search engine to look and see on the internet if anything is there. And now we're just like, Google it. Just Google it, right? It's become a verb. Apple wants you to think different, right? So they're trying to create products that put you on a whole nother plane, like of existence that you can do things with. We have Fox News with a more conservative reputation, and then CNN typically has a more liberal leaning reputation. So that would be important to know if you are being persuaded by the news to think a certain thing, because, if Fox News says something, you might say, okay, that's probably a conservative twist on that because I know their reputation, their ethos is that they are conservative, versus CNN, you'd be like, oh, okay, I know that probably has a more liberal leaning because that is a more liberal reputation, and they're going to lean that way. Okay. This was Oprah talking at a Stanford University commencement address. She said, I started this school in Africa where I'm trying to give South African girls a shot at a future like yours. And I spent 5 years making sure that school was as beautiful as the students. And yet last fall, I was faced with a crisis. I was told that one of the dorm matrons was suspected of sexual abuse. That was, as you can imagine, devastating news. First I cried, actually I sobbed, and the whole time I kept asking that question, what is this here to teach me? So obviously there's a pathos element there. She's talking about emotion. She was devastated. She sobbed. And when you think of someone who's experienced any kind of abuse, that does tug at your emotions. But she's also using her reputation here to explain what happened, right? Because, she's Oprah, and she started this school in Africa, and yet this bad thing happened. But she's saying, like, this isn't what I wanted to happen, and so, I'm trying to think, what is this here to teach me? So you should listen to my reputation and know that this was never my intention, right? She's using her reputation to build this school, and now the university is using her reputation to teach these students, right? The last part of the rhetorical triangle is logos. So it's arguments based on logic. Here we have a graph. So logic typically is facts, statistics, things that you can't argue with. And here we have the Little Debbie Facebook favorites. So you can make a statement, chocolate cupcakes by Little Debbie are not as good as Nutty Bars. And that would be pretty factually correct. People aren't going to argue because they can look at this graph and say, okay, yeah, that is logical. I believe you. Now, the important thing to be aware of with logos and then facts and statistics is you got to look at the source and like the biases, right? So this is a Facebook favorites. Does this mean that they pulled people who weren't on Facebook? No. A lot of people have Facebook, but who really takes those polls, right? So you have to be like, okay, where is this information coming from? Is it reliable? And so even if you have a fact, you still need to vet those sources to make sure that they're good. Here's another graph. You could make statements on this saying like, oh, clearly we need to sell more of the blue squares during July because the other two are not doing as well, whereas in January we can really focus on our red triangles, right? So you can look at different graphs and make statements and use that to back what you're saying and convince people to agree with you. In writing, people often will use logos to convince people. There was a book, When Decency Disappears. In this book, the author argues that ghetto blacks are worse off than ever, victimized by a near total loss of low-skilled jobs in and around inner-city neighborhoods. In support of this thesis, he musters mountains of data, plus excerpts from some of the thousands of surveys and face-to-face interviews that he and his research team conducted among inner-city Chicagoans. It is a book that deserves a wide audience among thinking conservatives. So you have here, they're talking about black people who live in the inner city, right? And they're saying that they are having a really hard time, and then they use facts to show why this is true. It's because they have a lot of data that shows that. They have excerpts of surveys and face-to-face interviews, so that is kind of like a social science evidence. And then they have his research team, right, that went and did all of this. So this would be logos trying to convince you to agree with him. Okay. Again, the most important thing to be aware of with logos is that you need to use reason. So don't fall into logical fallacies. Here we have a penguin, right? It says penguins are black and white. some old TV shows are black and white, therefore some penguins are old TV shows. So you got to make sure that you don't extrapolate your facts and use it to prove something that isn't really provable like that. Okay, so that is it. That is ethos, pathos, and logos, and we will talk more about this and how you can convince people in your essay, right? So you're going to want to be aware of the ethos of the sources you're pulling. Like, are they credible sources? Are these people that we can believe? Are they logical? Do they have facts and data and things to back up what they're saying? And then how can I create an argument that will appeal to my audience emotionally that will make them want to agree with me? So we'll talk more about that in class. Thank you.